It's great that y'all are here. I know there's so many other things that everyone could be doing. It's a choice to be here. Really appreciate it. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm Callie Justice. I've been working with Declare Emergency for close to 2 years now, and I'll be hosting the event this afternoon on behalf of the Declare Emergency Mobilization Circle. That's the circle that outreaches, that invites people in, and that's what we're looking to do here. Very much strongly an invitation to join interactions. In a minute, we're going to hear from 3 wonderful speakers, which is really a privilege. And it's also really gratifying to see each of you here. Not just everybody would show up for an event about the importance of being willing to sacrifice. It's a very self-selected group, so look around and appreciate who else is here with you. I suggest. In getting ready for the event today, I was reminded of a story that Roger Hallam tells in his talk, How to Stop the Climate Crisis in 6 Months. It seems that after World War II, a group of researchers conducted an investigation to try and answer the question, what features are common or characterize the people who risked their lives to protect Jewish people and others during the Holocaust. So they were looking for, demographic measures. They were looking at age or nationality, income level, social class, religion. They looked at everything they could think of, and they couldn't come up with any measure that would have allowed them to predict who would make that kind of choice to risk sacrificing themselves, even their families, for others. They found nothing. But what those people had in common was a sense of themselves. They all reported that that's just who they were, that they made the choices they made because they couldn't have faced living with themselves if they hadn't. So that makes me appreciate who's here today also in that context. We live in hard times, as you all know, that are sure to get harder, much, much harder. Just continuing to face today's realities, day after day, not looking away, seeing the headlines and knowing what they mean in terms of real life suffering is traumatic, it's painful, it's terrifying, it's enraging. That's a sacrifice, that being willing to see and to know, to not be in denial. The world never looks the same again, and I think most, if not all of you, know that. So we hope that today's event will support each of us to continue to face these realities and have the strength to do whatever it takes to nonviolently resist their causes. That's what we're here for. So after we hear from Rosemary and Lauren and Laura, wave everybody, so glad you're here. After we do that, we're going to move into the breakout rooms, and there's where we're going to talk over what you've heard and give you a chance to act with whatever degree of sacrifice you're able at this time to help declare emergency, force Joe Biden to declare a climate emergency. That's what we're here about. Just put that up front. It's been a pleasure, the little bit I've gotten to know our speakers from New Zealand and from Canada. Already know Lauren, and that's also a pleasure from Declare Emergency. But gotten to know you all a bit while setting things up for today. And it's a pleasure and an honor to get to introduce them to you now. So we're going to move into the speakers part of the event. And first, we're going to hear from Rosemary. I'll say a little bit about her because it's fun to talk about Rosemary already, just the little I know you. Rosemary describes herself as a retired grandma living in a small village just north of Dunedin, New Zealand, where, by the way, it's tomorrow morning right now. So thanks for getting up to be with us, Rosemary. As you will hear, she's been doing amazing work there with Restore Passenger Rail, which is an 822 network campaign, just like Declare Emergency is, but they're in New Zealand. And Rosemary tells us that she is, and I'm going to quote her now, prepared to do everything within my power to get the changes we need for my grandchildren to have a future. Rosemary.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Rosemary Penwarden, tōku ingoa. Thanks so much for inviting me. I feel really honoured. I want to start by acknowledging my privilege as a white woman who's had a peaceful life on this beautiful earth. My ancestors came from the British Isles 4 generations ago during the colonisation of Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'd like to acknowledge tangata whenua and tangata tiriti, the indigenous people of this land, and the whenua, the colonised land itself, where sovereignty was never ceded. And today I have to acknowledge the people of Palestine, also colonised, right now being slaughtered in their homes, in their schools, in their hospitals. Now is my time to give back, and it's my duty and my privilege. All of us alive today, those who can. This is our purpose, whether we've woken up to it or not, to fight like hell, non-violently, to save what we can of a livable future. It's a no-brainer. Our leaders are not going to do it. We know this, so we have to. A little bit about myself and how I got to here. I grew up on a small farm in the North Island. Can everybody hear me? All good? Okay. So rural New Zealand in the 1960s was full of conservative, hardworking people who didn't ever complain. Kids were seen and not heard, except if you were a boy who played rugby. Girls didn't really have a voice. I was daughter number 4 of 7. So I grew up very quiet with not much confidence, but at the same time, with some practical skills. I learned how to skin a possum, cook a meal, change a tire. I was up for adventure from a pretty early age. I trained as a medical laboratory scientist, had a couple of children, and generally had a pretty normal life. I became the union representative at Dunedin Hospital Laboratory. Our hours were unsafe and we were exhausted. I led us out on strike for better conditions. We won. It was a scary, scary time, but I saw what ordinary people can do when they stick together and work together for a common goal. Pretty good thing to learn at a reasonably young age. And then I worked for the union, and because I was being targeted by my employer. So it was a new private laboratory that took over the hospital work. So I went and worked for the union and got more training and learning how to stick up for myself. And for a few years, just before I had my children, I traveled. And that was a kind of rite of passage for New Zealanders, young New Zealanders, especially in the 1980s and 90s. Not so much now for all the reasons we know so much about. We called it OE. So I bought my backpack, went off on my OE, overseas experience. I traveled through Mexico and Guatemala. Early 80s, I witnessed real poverty, And in Guatemala, I witnessed death. I witnessed blood. I witnessed fighting and real fear. I'd inadvertently walked into civil war. I started learning and figuring out what was really happening in the world. And I started figuring out who's in charge, who's holding the power, and who's suffering as a result. For me, it comes down to justice, fairness. And I think that's at the bottom of things. And the biggest injustice going on right now, as we all know, because we're here today, and I don't really need to talk about it. I've heard Roger Hallam name it the carbon regime. Edward S. Herman, as many of you may have heard of, called it the unelected dictatorship of money. These few are sending us and everything we know towards extinction. So looking back, I think I've been training for this stuff my whole life. And lately, with the people around me who I really trust, and finding the A22 network with others like you guys and like thousands of young people in Europe and Canada, USA, all over the world, I feel as though I've started growing into the person I need to be right now, into my humanness. And I feel really grateful to have the opportunity to actually be alive right now, because there's nothing more important than to try to make the changes we need to survive. And there's only us to do this. So I've made a choice to be in the service, to be in service to every living thing. I have to. It's exactly what you said, Kelly. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. But it doesn't feel so much like a sacrifice to me. Plus, I still live in a country where I won't be murdered for protecting this world. So I'm in service for those people who actually are facing so much worse than I'll ever see here. So the action of actually getting arrested, I acknowledge how different that is for me. I'm white, I'm older, I'm articulate, but in prison, our prisons, even in New Zealand, and I hate to admit it, it's so shameful, are full of young, beautiful, energetic, brown-skinned women. In the women's prison where I was, there is so much to fix. But the actual action is a tiny part of it. To me, most of it is about relearning what matters. Remaining humble, learning to remain humble, finding joy in our relationships and in nature and in the small things. And also being prepared to do the hard work of building a movement. It's hard and it's thankless. And I think the real heroes are the ones working behind the scenes. And there's probably a lot of you here tonight, today, this morning, wherever you are. Action is scary. Peacefully breaking the law is scary. I'm quite good at looking calm and smiling on the outside, but I still get nervous as hell. I get a dry mouth, my heart beats wildly, and I have to talk my way carefully through every step. But you know, doing this work, I feel strong, stronger than I've ever felt. There are lots of practical steps to think of. The biggest, I think, is to surround yourself with supportive people. I feel so lucky with a partner who loves gardening. He grows most of our food. And a son and daughter who are really supportive. And a couple of grandchildren. My grandson, Arlo, he's 12. Excuse me, I get a bit emotional when I talk about them. He wrote to me when I was in prison and said, Rama, he calls me Rama, I want to be like you when I grow up. Yeah, I feel so lucky. I need to get better at a lot of things. And one of them is to prepare them more for the unknown and for maybe for the next time I get arrested. My daughter Arani said it was the hardest few weeks of her life. She told me that just last week. So I really didn't know that I'd upset her that much. I needed to prepare her, talk her through things a bit more than I had. There's other really important practical stuff. And I'm so lucky. I've lived long enough to have a home with no mortgage. We grow most of our own food. We very deliberately built ourselves a really small house. There's only 2 of us. And so that we could grow food, plant lots of native trees. We've got way more food than for us. So we grow food for local food for lots of people. So that I can spend a lot of my time working for Restore Passenger Rail here in New Zealand. It's also really, really important to make time for the things you love. We've got 10 acres here and we grow nuts and fruits and berries and veggies. I love the taste of the first of the vegetables as they come ripe, like right at the moment, early spring. And I'm just picking the broad beans while they're still little and munching them off the vine. I'll be pretty sick of broad beans in a few more weeks. But by then, maybe the little carrots will be up. I love my electric mower. I love playing with my grandkids and singing and balancing the batteries in my home-built electric car. So make time for the things you love. I'd also like to end with thanks for reaching out to me, because what inspires me so much is to know that you're all there, and that those people in Europe and in the UK and in Australia, we're all fighting for the same thing. I feel like we're a team. I feel like we're an international swarm of bees, or in my med lab science work, I think of us as the killer cells targeting the virus. And if there's still time, I'd like to end with one of my favorite quotes from your country. Even though I learned the negativity of your government and the military industrial complex, which I absolutely hate, I have had so much inspiration from people like Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn, all those amazing, amazing scholars. This is one of my favorite people at the moment, Rebecca Solnit, and it's about hope. And it's one of my favorites. So it takes a moment. Hope is not a lottery ticket that you can sit on the sofa and clutch, feeling lucky. It is an axe that you break down doors with in an emergency. Hope should shove you out the door, because it will take everything you have, excuse me, to steer the future away from the annihilation of the earth's treasures and the grinding down of the poor and the marginal. To hope is to give yourself to the future. And that commitment to the future is what makes the present inhabitable. Thank you. Noho ora mai rā.
Thank you, Rosemary. I want to go ahead and ask you now if you wouldn't mind sharing that quote with me, because I know that many people here would like to have it. We can put it in the newsletter and pass it around. Thank you. And thanks so much for being here and for everything you do. And lovely to hear from you. Lovely to be in the same boat with you. Thank you. Need to ask people to please keep yourself on mute. What's happening in your world is being shared in our world. And Nathan, we're going to wait until we get in the breakout rooms, unless there's something you're having trouble with. Is there?
Well, no, it's not. Well, it is something I'm having trouble with, and I'd appreciate the opportunity to briefly mention this to the group. Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what. I tell you what. We're not going to do that. We're going to ask you to wait till the breakout rooms, because I'm sure a lot of people have things they're thinking right now. But let's all be in the same container together. It's good to have you here with us. Thanks. really appreciate it. Yeah, so our next speaker, which is what we're looking forward to next, is Lauren. Lauren is currently doing a great job serving as coordinator for Declare Emergencies Nonviolent Resistance trainings. Yay, Lauren, thank you so much for that. And she has thought really deeply about the relationship between privilege and sacrifice. And we're grateful that Lauren's here today to share her thinking and also the decisions that she's reached out of that thinking with us. So, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, and thank you to Rosemary for sharing your story. Thank you for your wonderful inspiration, and thank you to everyone here too who came to join us today and who's in this work with us together. I also, following Rosemary, your beautiful acknowledgements, want to acknowledge that I am calling in from what we recognize that the U.S. government is St. Paul, Minnesota, but traditionally the homeland of the Dakota people. And I, again, just appreciate getting the opportunity to be here with you all today and share my thoughts. So as Callie mentioned, I wanted to share some of my thoughts, or was asked to share my thoughts and my story about how I arrived at my decision to risk arrest in engaging in nonviolent civil resistance work in defense of the climate and in support of climate justice. So when I think about this, for me, a lot of it really comes down to just recognizing my privileges. And what I mean by my privileges, I think, just to put it simply, is the aspects of my identity and circumstances that buffer against risk. And so I think some of the ways that for me, I think about that, some examples are, for example, as a US citizen, I am protected against the risk of being deported, being separated from my family, my livelihood, my homes, my home, my loved ones, all of that, if risking arrest. I also think about, for example, as a white person, being statistically less likely to experience violence at the hands of potentially police or people in jail, or the people whose lives we're disrupting. And so these are some examples of some of the very many privileges, aspects of my identity and circumstances that that I have had to reflect on, and recognizing buffers me against some of those risks that can come with risking arrest. Likewise, there are aspects of our identities and circumstances that may put us in greater risk. And for me, as a person with a non-apparent mental health disability, one of the risks that I have to weigh when I step into an action and risk arrest is, if I am jailed long term, being cut off from the things that I need to stay well, and risking relapse of mental illness and additional harms that can come from that as well. So these are all the kind of factors that I weigh and that I take into consideration when I choose to risk arrest. And there are many layers to privilege, and some of them are deeper, some of them are, more at the surface, some of them are visible, some of them are hidden, and it's really up to each one of us to figure out what that is for ourselves. So for me, the only person that can really do a full assessment of what are those risks that I'm taking, and what are all of the privileges that I have that are buffering me against those risks. You know, for example, all of the privileges that I'm carrying also make it less likely that I, may be in a situation where I'll be jailed long term and be faced with that significant risk that would come with risking relapse of mental illness and symptoms that come with that. So that is, I think, just a calculation assessment that is really up to every person to make for themselves. And for me, when I do that assessment for myself and I just think about where I'm at in my life and just all of the wonderful privileges that I have, all of the things that I'm so grateful for too, it just becomes a no-brainer for me to take that risk of arrest, that I have so much at my disposal to buffer against truly the greatest risks that can come from that, that it just doesn't make sense for me not to do it. It's like trying to light a fire and one person has two sticks that they're rubbing together and somebody else has a blowtorch. Like, use the blowtorch. Like, that's my, I just feel like I have these privileges, I have this opportunity, and this is where it makes sense for me to use it. I also think about, with the climate crisis, the people who are being hurt first and worst right now: Indigenous communities, people, working class, people living in poverty, people in rural communities, Black, African American, people of color, people living in the global South. These communities are among the communities that are being hurt first and worst. And when I think about, for example, the thousands of people in Pakistan who lost their lives and their homes and their loved ones in the horrible floods that just happened last year, and to know that I have the incredible privilege of standing on this ground in this country where our leaders are actively deciding to continue being the biggest fossil fuel polluters in the world, that I have the privilege to get to step out into the street and call on my president to stop that. And the little bit of risk that I am taking in that, it just doesn't even compare to the risks that I know that the people who don't even have a choice in the matter, who are on the front lines, who are being hurt first and worst. If nothing else, it is just the smallest act of solidarity that I can give up something, even if it's to sit in jail for half a day, knowing that there are people who tomorrow are very likely to lose their lives because of the climate crisis. And so I just wanted to share that with you, that this is all just how I came to decide and how I came to feel called to do this work and to risk arrest. And one other piece that I'm learning, as Callie knows, because we've had this conversation recently too, is when we think about privilege, another aspect of privilege is who the law protects and whose comfort the law protects. And I'm learning that oftentimes the bigger risks in terms of, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor, or how many days you risk being in jail, often have to do with the level of privilege of the lives who you're disrupting in the process. And so, for example, in DC, blocking traffic on the Beltway, people, predominantly middle class, upper class people in the suburbs trying to make it to the airport for their trips, getting disrupted, risks a lot longer jail time than disrupting traffic in downtown DC, where you're keeping working class people from, getting to their daily commute to their job. And so I think another piece for me too is for those of us who can afford to take those greater risks, to step up and do that, because it's not fair for the people with less privilege to be the ones always being disrupted either, because our society places less value on their comfort. And so with that, I will end my talk. Thank you everyone for being here and just taking the time to let me share. And thank you, Callie, for inviting me, and I will pass it over back to Callie and our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Lauren. There's a lot to think about in what you've said. And it's the kind of thing that it's not just one time around in the mind, really. It's the way you're describing it, an ongoing practice, right? To keep these discernments in the front of our thinking around our choices. Thank you so much. You're such a deep, thoughtful person. I really appreciate hearing from you. And our final speaker now, before we move into the breakout rooms and have a chance to process with each other and get some support from each other around what we're hearing, our final speaker is Laura. Laura is a passionate and dedicated activist in Canada. I learned this, I think we talked for an hour. We got on the phone and blah, and she is. I can say that confidently after that time with speaking with her, and you'll know that in a minute too. She's been arrested 3 times over the past few months in just such a short time, on the front lines, nonviolently fighting climate catastrophe. I'm going to give you just a little preview of what you'll hear from Laura. I hope I'm not taking away something she was going to say, but this is a quote from the bio that she gave us to use in publicizing this event. I think we all probably want to put it on our refrigerators. So she wrote, when injustice is law, resistance is duty. And we live in times with a moral imperative to do whatever it takes to save humanity. When injustice is law, resistance is duty. Laura.
Okay, everyone can hear me, okay? Yeah, okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Callie, for hosting this event. And thanks so much, Lauren and Rosemary, to hear your experiences and your stories. It's really great to hear from both of you. So I am currently speaking to you from Jokjage, otherwise known as Montreal, on Kanien'kehá:ka unceded territory. I've been really working on my pronunciation of that. I don't think it's perfect, but taking my time, I've just moved here. So yeah, my name is Laura, and I'm currently speaking to you today as simply just an activist, a climate activist. And that is because, yes, as Callie said, I've been arrested 3 times in the past few months, participating in acts of nonviolent civil disobedience, demanding that the government take action on the wildfire crisis and the climate crisis that's currently destroying the lives of countless people across this world and in this country. But the reason why I can't tell you which project I've worked on or what I've been doing is because I'm currently under court-ordered conditions that prevent me from advocating for that project into the media. I cannot advocate for that project to other people. I can't even speak to a lot of members of that project because I was arrested for sitting in the road. So just being careful there and to not break that. I'm just speaking to you as Laura today. So yeah, I guess I feel like it's interesting to speak at a conference or a little Zoom call here about sacrifice, because I don't see what I have done as so much of a sacrifice. I see it as an imperative in these times. And I think that it's not a sacrifice because we need to look at things under the lens of what is really coming down the line. What really does sacrifice actually mean? So when we look at the climate science, which we all can read, we all can see, we are looking at conditions that are favorable towards societal collapse. And that is coming down the line for us in as soon as 11 years, when we are predicted to hit 2 degrees of warming. This September, we were already sitting at 1.75 above pre-industrial temperatures. And this crisis is here. I mean, it's here, as Lauren said, for the people in Pakistan, tons who lost their lives and their livelihoods due to the floods, people in Somalia who were facing unprecedented drought and hunger and starvation, people facing flash floods across the world. But here in Canada, we saw the worst wildfire season we've ever seen here. And not just by a bit, like 6 times worse than our average. We saw 200,000 people having to be evacuated from their homes. I had close friends who have lost their entire businesses, their entire homes completely just turned to ashes this summer. We see small Indigenous communities get decimated without the proper supports. And our government is not even currently handling these very first impacts of this crisis. The emissions that these wildfires put out were like doubling our global or Canada's current emissions. The climate crisis is here. Smoke and wildfire smoke was felt across this country. It's here. We can feel it. And yet everyone around is acting like business as normal. Everything's fine. What's up? What's going on with my exam tomorrow? What's happening with, oh no, I have this appointment on Friday, or, oh, I need to save up money for like my retirement, or I'm studying so that I can go get this job in this field. The future does not exist in the way that we all pretend like it does. We are really standing on the edge of the end right now. It's delusional the way that our entire society is acting. And, this is not me being crazy. This is me listening to someone like Sir David King, who told us in 2021 at a big conference that we had 3 to 4 years left to handle the climate crisis. If you look at the time now, it's 2023 and it's October. We're looking at like 1 year left to do something about this crisis. 1 year. So, when I think about sacrifice, I don't see this as an option. I don't see not taking action as an option. And it's not like we should just do this in a blind way. When we look historically, we see that civil resistance, nonviolent civil resistance, is the tried and true method that produces results. We've seen it. We've seen it in the Indian independence movement. We saw it in the civil rights movement. The suffragettes. There are women that came before me that got arrested and hunger striked in prison. 5 of those women died for my rights today. Those are the shoulders that I'm standing on in this moment. So now I'm alive and I exist in this moment, and I'm being told that I have no future unless I fight for it. So what did I do? Well, of course, there's no other option than to do what is right and to do what works and what is effective. I'm 24. I graduated from UBC, a university in British Columbia, And was able to study engineering. So I've had this amazing experience of being able to get this high level of education. And I wanted to study it because I wanted to study renewable energy infrastructure so I could go tackle the climate and ecological crisis, because it is the greatest social issue of our entire time. It is an existential issue, bottom line. Yet when I was studying, I realized that all of the infrastructure, all of the technology, this exists. It's all out there. It's the social and political will that does not exist, and it is what needs my attention. So that is how I have lived my life recently, is in alignment with that truth. And yeah, I mean, I really think that sacrifice is beyond an arrest. Like, there's so much more that comes around getting arrested. You're transgressing a social norm. I mean, I've taken part in some higher profile media actions where I've received a ton of hate. People have told me they want to kill me. People have told me horrible things. And, you know, sometimes you're just one person and you kind of feel like a loser, you know, but you have like when you take that and you place it in the face of what we're really up against, it's nothing. And yeah, I mean, there's always this thing, I think, inside of everyone, right, where we want to fit in, we want to be a part of something, we want to connect with people. So maybe that like holds us back from taking transgressive action and saying, no, this is not okay, and I can't live in alignment with this. So it kind of hurts, and that's okay, and we have to, I mean, accept that there's things that we have to push through here, but there's just simply no other option. Yeah, so I mean, I can't really say that what I've done has been so much of a sacrifice as it's a duty. I mean, my generation is going to be murdered at the hands of a tiny group of elite people. And scientists across the world are saying that it's a very small percentage of people, the elite, that are going to be responsible for the death of up to 1 billion people across this world. So, I mean, I just couldn't sit back and comply with that. And I think right now we have a very short amount of time to get something done. So what else is there to do? And you know, one thing that I'd like to mention, and this is something that I heard in a Roger Hallam talk a while ago, and so I'll say it in the way that I took it, but this wasn't my idea. But you know, the fact, when we zoom out and we really think about why we exist right now, what does it really mean to be alive? And I think about myself, and I mean, since I was a kid, I was pretty an existential thinker. But I was like, well, why am I here? What am I doing here? What's the point of life, right? Like, what am I doing? And the fact that, you know, my cells decided to collide together and form this consciousness, and I exist on this earth, is a total miracle. To exist and be alive in human form is this like incredible, amazing thing. But not only that, we all exist. We're all here right now, but we exist in the most critical moment in the history of humanity, in a moment where your actions could mitigate the suffering of billions of people. And that is like a double miracle. And what Roger was saying is that it's going to take a real miracle to get out of here, to get out of this crisis. But this already is a miracle that we even exist in this moment to do so. So I really don't see there being any other option. And I really truly believe that humanity is better than to give into extinction. I think that there's something that's beautiful as humanity. I know that humanity has done a lot of horrible and awful and disgusting things, and we're seeing that right now across the world. But there is a part of us that is better than that. And I believe that it is worth fighting for. And there's nothing else that should be done in this moment. As crazy as you may feel sometimes, as alienated as you might feel sometimes, there is nothing that's more important than this in this moment. I don't know if I have so much left to say. Maybe that was a bit all over the place, but I did want to share something before I finish speaking here. And it's a poem that I wrote, and this was, I wrote this, I think, 2 days after I got released from jail last time. And this was, yeah, I was released from the Ottawa Carleton Detention Center. I was held on remand, not as long as Rosemary, but I was just held there for like 33 hours. So it's nothing crazy, but I think a lot of people here would know that it's an experience for sure to go through that. It sucks, but yeah, no, I was promptly expelled from the capital city, so I can no longer return to Ottawa at this moment. But I'll share this poem that I wrote right after I was released. Cold concrete walls, metal flatbeds, time-warped perception, writhing to rest my head. My name reverberates through the cell block. So what do they know? They simply just found me, sat in a road. Above me in the real world, they sleepwalk into death. Those screaming from the underground cry out from the depths. Patience of virtue, I ease my mind slow. I'm only here for peacefully sitting in a road. My home is on fire, my future non-existent. And because I cannot stand by, I'm a criminal of resistance. Alleged to be so dangerous that my release requires show? All I did that day was just sit on a road. Overhead lighting, ambiance of desperation. Yet in cruelest conditions, I feel assimilation. When injustice is law, resistance bestowed, I had no other choice but to sit on that road. The dollar of this nation built on oil, gas, and blood. How will you feel when your little brother drowns in a flash flood? You'll watch your mother get raped, consequence of our status quo. So I'm the one endangering lives because I sat on a road? A society built on suffering. As I sit, I think of those who came before, women who suffered for my rights, the repression they endured. I must accept the time that is required of me down below. I understand the repercussions of sitting on a road. While there remains breath in my body, I will not stop. My voice is court-ordered to be repressed, so I'll just give it some thought. But we are the last generation with nowhere else to go. They say that there's less than 2 years left to go sit on a road. Thank you so much for listening.
Laura. I have already a copy of Laura's poem, and I will share it. So everybody can look forward to seeing that in the newsletter. It's feeling kind of weird to be like having a meeting now. Right? There's something that gets kind of routine about these meetings, and as our three speakers have just made it so clear, there's just nothing routine about the reality that we're facing together. As great as our speakers were, thank you for your words. Thank you for your choices. We know that you didn't come to this event to entertain us. You're here to inspire us and to invite us further into our communities of dedication and of willingness to sacrifice. Many of the people here are already taking those steps. In a few minutes, we're going to move into breakout rooms, and there is a tendency at this point in the meeting ritual for some people to leave, and some people need to leave. I know Laura and Lauren both are going to need to leave for other commitments. Rosemary's going to stay to join one of the breakout rooms. But before we make that shift, it's not just a ritual. In the breakout rooms, we're going to be asking you to let us know which of a few options you're going to be willing to sign up for. Because we're going back, Declare Emergency is going back to DC in a couple of weeks to do actions to demand that Joe Biden declare a climate emergency. People will be risking various kinds of sacrifice. But one of the things that you can do in the breakout room is to sign up to find out more about that. We seriously need people sitting in the road. That's it. It's that simple. We just saw in the Netherlands what happened when 9,000 people did that for a few weeks. They won their demand, and we need to do that too. In the US, probably more than anywhere else.